Michael Boyle's StrengthCoach.com presents the Strength Coach Podcast, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. PerformBetter.com.
All right, hey everybody, welcome to episode 239 of the Strength Coach Podcast, the official podcast of Michael Boyle's StrengthCoach.com, the world's best source for strength and conditioning information, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation, PerformBetter.com. All right, I'm your host, Anthony Renna, and the show notes are located at my site, ContinueFit.com. It's where I keep all my resources, including Strength Coach TV. All right, on the StrengthCoach.com, Strength Coach's Corner, I spoke to Coach Boyle about his experimentation with trap bar jumping, training injured clients, and some insights into hamstring training. For the Results Fitness University Business of Fitness segment, Rachel Cosgrove is on to talk about the Results Fitness 100 Workout Challenge. For the Functional Movement System segment, Lee Burton starts a two-part series regarding research and data regarding the FMS system that has come out recently. For the Train Heroic Data-Driven Coaching segment, Adam Doughty talks to Tim Robinson. I love these two guys. They do such a great job with this segment. They talk about internal and external loads. Remember, if you're not doing online training, guys, you're missing out. Remember, you can go to trainheroic.com. They got a free 14-day trial, and if you decide to stay on, which you should, they got a nice discount, 10% on their Elite and Pro editions. For the MariGold Bars, Hit the Gym with the Strength Coach segment, Jim Kielbaso is on. He's the president of the International Youth Conditioning Association, and he did an Instagram video talking about some misconceptions on long-term athletic development. So I texted him. I was like, Jim, let's get on and kind of go over some of that stuff, get a little deep into it. So today is all about youth training and long-term athletic development. All right, lots of things to get to, so let's get on the phone with Coach Boyle. All right, now it's time for the StrengthCoach.com Coach's Corner with Coach Boyle. StrengthCoach.com, the world's best source for strength and conditioning information. You can try StrengthCoach.com out for 3 days. Just $1, you'll have access to all the articles, videos, and programs, as well as the best forum on the net. It's the only place to have full access to Coach Boyle. He's on every day. Check it out at StrengthCoach.com. Coach, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Ian. How are you?
All right, a little fall cleaning for you out there, splitting wood, huh?
Yeah, getting ready to use my wood stove. I love to light a fire.
Very cool, Coach. We, you and I off mic, we're just talking about kind of social media stuff that we've been doing a lot, and it's a surprise that we what we think is not going to be. We think it's going to be popular, hopefully, but not. Sometimes some things just get so crazy, like today's trap bar jump post. You posted one of the New Jersey Devils players, Miles Wood, doing some trap bar jumps at 95. He's using 95 pounds, and you've said you've used these all summer. You've been really playing with these to try and find those loads and loads that yield less than 60% of the best vertical jump. So if somebody's vertical jump is 20 inches, you want to see at least a 12-inch vertical jump with the load. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Okay. That is exactly what we're saying.
Okay. Yeah. So, and then, but the loads, you're finding out that's right around 50% of what their body weight would be?
Well, I mean, like I was saying to some people, I think you want to stay with that, the lowest 60. We're trying to stay really between 70 and 80, but not, if we end up in the 60s, and it looks okay, we can live with it. But I was just trying to say to them, that for Miles is about 50% of his body weight, give or take. He's 10, 5, something like that. But the point being, if I went down for someone like Mark, at 120 and I gave Mark 60, he'd look like crap. Like he couldn't do it with 45. So that's why I think people have to be careful with when they use those standards of percentage of body weight or percentage. Like for Miles, that's why I said, it's about 25% of his deadlift max. And these were the guidelines that people used to use, I think, basing it on, do you get the explosiveness that you want based on what their vertical jump is? is a much better indicator. So I think that idea, like I said, 60 being the low end, 80 being the high end. If they're getting above 80, so like Miles is a 36-inch vertical jump. If he's getting 30 with the trap bar, we don't have enough load. And with Miles in the same case, if he's getting 20, we probably have too much. So I think it's trying to find, and that's what is the interesting part of this, that for me at least, from playing around with it, is trying to figure out, okay, what is that sweet spot? Where do we really want to be that's going to give us what we want?
Coach, you were talking about the kind of like the eye test, like does it look awkward? Just for people that really, what are some things that you're going to say, look, if it looks like this, it's too much.
I use the same analogy all the time. I always say, I don't know if you remember years ago, they had the pornography in the Supreme Court decision, but the guys said he couldn't define pornography, but he knew it when he saw it. And that's how I feel with this, because it needs it. I wrote in one of the posts last week, I said, it should look athletic. And somebody posted, what does athletic look like? I'm like, athletic looks athletic. Like, you'll know it when you see it. If you see somebody that looks non-athletic, And the guy was almost offended by the term, but I think it's that idea that you'll look at it and be like, oh, that's too heavy. It doesn't look right. The landing doesn't look right. The takeoff doesn't look right. It shouldn't look laborious. It shouldn't look like someone was lifting weights. It should look like med ball throws or like plyos, or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't really have sort of a quantifiable, it should look like X. But at the same time, I feel like people should be able to look at that and go, I go back to my shit test thing. If you go out in the yard and I say, is that shit or an ice cream cone? It's not going to take too long for somebody to go, oh, that's definitely a pile of shit. That's not ice cream. You know what I mean? It should be fairly obvious to people that that's kind of shitty. I think that's too much weight. And I think that's where I feel like that's maybe the biggest mistake we make as professionals is and this is interesting because I'm going out to Altus to talk in a month. And it's one of the things I say, like, why you shouldn't copy track coaches. When you copy track coaches who have these like really elastic, really high responding kind of people, everything looks good. And then you take it back like to your middle school kids and you're like, oh, that doesn't look very good. And bounding is that way. Bounding looks great when you've got a guy that can bound. And bounding looks like shit when you've got a guy that can't. And there's just it's so easy to look and be like, oh, that's not good.
Yeah.
And I guess that's really what we're looking at is that, whatever, coach's eye test, everybody, I think, has a little different term for how they want to define it, but I don't think it's hard to define.
Yeah. And I guess you could just take the weight away and look at their regular vertical jump and see that, it's most likely going to look athletic. And if it doesn't, you probably shouldn't be doing them anyway. The trap bar jumps.
There's another really good point right there. If that doesn't look athletic, you probably shouldn't be doing it. And that's probably pretty accurate.
Yeah. Coach, somebody asked a question. I thought this is an interesting question. Do you have the athletes use their arms during the vertical jump test, or do you test with the arms at the side during the jump to mimic the trap bar loaded jump? So in other words, okay, they're not going to use their arms in this trap bar loaded, so it might skew this, numbers result.
Well, that was an interesting question. When we vertical jump, we use arms. We do a counter movement jump. And so we know we're comparing basically a counter movement to a non-counter movement jump in terms of, or at least a jump with arm swing to a jump without arm swing. But that's why we're in that, we said 70 to 80 is kind of the sweet spot. 60 to 70, you can kind of look at and go, what does it look like?
Yeah.
Under 60, no good. We kind of base it, if you said, okay, 30-inch vertical jump, that means somebody with a 30-inch vertical is going to be under 18. And, if they're under 18, it's probably not looking real explosive, not looking like what we want it to look like. And as we said, the lower the vertical jump relative to body weight, the less likely you are to even be able to do this.
Absolutely. Coach, let's move on to another thing that I posted on social media was your quote. Lately you have been doing some things on the site like combining different articles. So, for example, you posted a bunch of articles on one page about training injured clients, and then a bunch of ACL links, a bunch of hamstring links, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But for this injured one, I took a quote. I encourage them to focus on healthy parts. If it's an arm, you still have another one, and 2 legs. Training shouldn't stop. And I think I posted it just because my wife just had surgery on her wrist. She had the pisiform bone taken out about a month ago, 6 weeks ago. And so we're training for this little thing. I said, no, we could still do some stuff. So I put the weight vest on her to be able to do some squats and some lunges. And we used the sandbag was really helpful because we can almost get in like that Zercher position for some squats, and even like the hugging position for some lunges and some squats and deadlifts. In deadlifts, I even used I had her only use her 2 fingers, not the pinky, because the pisiform is on the same side as the pinky and I didn't want to aggravate it. So I just had her holding the sandbag with 2 fingers, which is fine. And then I had her doing just the left arm with some presses and rows on some bands. We got so much play. So many people like this. I can't believe the amount of shares that we got. You and I were talking, we kind of think we think this is kind of common sense, but why do you think that this is so, people don't realize this?
I guess it's what part of it goes into like all the scare tactics, scope of practice, refer out, all that stuff that people have to parrot around.
Yeah.
And so I think it gets everybody nervous, and it goes back. It's common for doctors to say, oh, you hurt your blank, I don't want you to work out for a month. And without ever thinking about, does that make any sense at all? And I guess the difference is in the athletic world is if we got a guy, whatever, guy breaks his foot, we're trying to figure out how much can I keep this guy doing while we're waiting 6 to 8 weeks for his foot to heal? How can I possibly, whether it's running in the pool and working the opposite leg and doing hip exercises with the injured side leg and working his upper body and doing core work. And I've always done that because it just made sense. I mean, you got a professional athlete who's going to, try to get back as soon as they possibly can. You want to do as much as you possibly can to help them do that. So to me, it seems very common sense, rote, old hat, whatever. I mean, I have all these workouts written up. I have workouts, one arm workouts, one leg workouts, back injury workouts, shoulder injury workouts that I've composed over the years working with injured players. So to me, it seems extremely common sense. But I think the average trainer is probably afraid. And I think that's maybe that sudden kind of knock on the head, like, oh, yeah, I guess if, like your wife with her wrist, as long as you're not saying, hey, let's do some wrist curls, let's take your cast off, you're going to be fine. Like you said, even holding a sandbag on her forearms isn't really going to affect her wrist. And so I think it just maybe gives people a little more license to think.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, again, going back to common sense, it wasn't like I did that the first 2 weeks. I wasn't going to do that because, she's a little nervous. So, yeah, okay. And also, I think one of the things that I love what you said at the end, just a warning, even if you think the PT is horrible and a waste of time, keep your mouth shut and learn. You might learn that you don't want clients seeing that PT, but you'll still learn something. Visits with PTs will help you build your network and may even get you a few more clients. Every physical therapist likes a trainer that likes to learn. I think, also the bottom line is we should accept that they're going to that physical therapist and just say, look, they're running the show. Let's do whatever. I always called the physical therapist and said, hey, what can I not do? What do you absolutely don't want me doing? And that gives me what I can do. So I think, it's important to make sure you're still thinking of that PT and not just saying, I'm going to do whatever I want to do.
Right, exactly. And I used to do the same thing with doctors, with PTs. A lot of my really good relationships with people are because I did that, because I went and I sat in and I kept my mouth shut. And then when I felt informed enough to ask a question, it was like, okay, can we still do lower body if I don't put anything in their hands? And usually the doctor or the PT would look at it and go, yeah, of course you can do that. Because obviously they're smart, they get it. And then you start to develop your own thought process. Like, okay, I know if I have this, I can do this. And like you said, maybe in the first 2 weeks, maybe, sometimes when we've got people where they're still kind of in the wound care stage, they've still got stitches in, things are still healing. Okay, we're going to really chill with that person. But once that person, usually, as I said, in the pro athlete world, that person is gnawing at the bit. What can I do? What can I do? What can I do? And the doctor or the trainer or whoever is there is letting them do. Again, common sense would say to you, why not let them use their other arm? Why not let them use their legs? Why not do core stuff? As long as we're not disturbing the joint that was injured, worked on, repaired, whatever it is, it makes no sense not to do that.
Absolutely.
So that's a big part of it.
And you had referenced the that cross transfer article where there's that research saying that if you like it's my wife's right arm, if we just worked on the left side, there will be some strength gains in the right side, like very minor, but there's still some gains to be made.
Yeah, and that's that's another one of those things. And I wrote that article a really long time ago, but I think sometimes when we get these out in different form, and that was in response, again, it was Ahmed, I think, had asked me that, had sent me the question sort of offline. And I said, I'm going to write this up as an article and then I'll post it. And that's, as you said, that's what I'm trying to do more on the site is turn questions into articles or turn questions into whole areas like, hey, I got somebody with a hamstring pull. Okay, here's 7 articles on hamstrings for you to read, as opposed to asking them to search the site, which we know how to do it. So it's easy for us to search rapidly and find what we want. But I think the average person who comes to the site maybe isn't as comfortable doing that. So I think we're doing a little bit of that for them.
Absolutely. Coach, I want to go over one more of those. And that was, you posted a bunch of hamstring articles, but I did want to mention, and I meant to get her to send us a video. Nicole Rodriguez did a lecture in Long Beach, and she was talking about some success that they've had in Dutch volleyball with hamstrings. And what she's doing is actually on the slide board leg curls and the single leg deadlift, she's actually externally rotating the foot out a little bit. And they said there's a little bit more activation in lateral hamstring, I guess biceps femoris.
Yeah, there definitely is.
Okay, so they've been having, she said it was kind of one of those weird, the therapist, I guess, had said something to her about that. They were having some knee pain, and so they were working on this idea of, they've just made this minor switch so they've had externally rotated. She put the foot down in the hamstring, in the slide board leg curl, foot down on the ground instead of having the toes up, and externally rotating it. And then same thing with that single leg deadlift to get a little bit more hamstring activation, to strengthen that lateral hamstring. And she said she's seen tremendous success with knee pain was that something that you've ever worked on or thought about?
It's funny. We've gone the opposite way because most people will tend to rely more on that lateral hamstring because it is like a tibial external rotator. So we tended to try to get them to stop doing that, which is interesting. So I didn't see her lecture, so I'll have to give that a little thought here.
Yeah, I'm going to have her maybe post something on the site for that. But is there anything also that you feel like just lately there's been so much going on with the hamstrings and again, you posted all of that, the More Hamstring Talk. Is there anything that really has maybe changed a little bit for you or some things you've been thinking about lately?
I don't think there's as much that's changed as it is just getting people. I think there's been way too big an emphasis on Nordics and a lot of that stuff. And I feel like if you can't bridge correctly in terms of with core control and you can't slide board leg curl with core control, then things like you're going to do Nordics lousy and you're going to see a lot of kind of the demos that we see on the internet with a lot of hip flexion, and you're just going to see some stuff that probably isn't necessarily all that good.
Absolutely. Good stuff, Coach. All right. Well, on that note, we'll let you go. So thanks for coming on, and we'll talk to you next time.
All right. Thanks, Ant. I appreciate it.
All right. Hey, guys, remember that Perform Better huge summer sale, 40% off So many items, sleds, dumbbells, kettlebells, foam rollers, all of their best items. It's ending soon. It ends this month. Make sure you get in on this. This is the best time to buy a bunch of equipment. Also, summit season's over, but the Perform Better Functional Training Institute kicks in. They have a speakers school coming up in October. They also have something called the Startup School coming up in November, and as well as Guy Massey, my last episode. He's also coming up with his developing the athlete, the modern athlete and client. So lots of stuff going on at the Perform Better Functional Training Institute. Check it out at performbetter.com.
Hi, this is Tim.
And this is Adam.
Welcome to the Train Heroic Data-Driven Coaching segment.
That's us.
And Adam, I think we have a pretty important topic today, in my opinion. Last time we were on, we talked about an abundance of things, but most notably, I think we touched on internal and external load, and we kind of just grazed the surface of those terms. And I think it's really, really important if we just kind of review and reflect what those things are, why they're important, and how you go about measuring internal load versus maybe external load.
Sure, yeah. And these can both be really useful, and we're really familiar with them, maybe just not with those terms.
Yeah.
But let's kind of define those concepts. So an external load is really an objective measure of what the athlete did.
Yep.
So Tim, if I told you, hey, I went on a 5-mile run today.
I'd be shocked.
Yeah, I understand. You're right. You'd have an idea of whether that's going to be hard or easy for me. So if I'm somebody who never runs, you'd be like, dude, that's good for you. And it probably is kind of challenging, you know. But if somebody is routinely going on like 10, 15-mile training runs, you'd probably just look at me like, oh, I mean, are you going out again?
It's a joke, yeah.
Right? So it's kind of, that gives you some, if you have the context, it gives you some knowledge of what the athlete did.
Yeah.
But often we want to know how hard that was.
Yep.
So it's not really sufficient for me to say, hey, I ran 5 miles today. And you wouldn't probably prescribe that to somebody. Well, you wouldn't always prescribe that to somebody, hey, if they're just a serious athlete, right? But you would use something else to modify. Hey, I want you to go easy today. Or I want you to go hard today. That's actually prescribing a different stressor.
Yeah, totally.
Right? And so now we get to internal loads. An internal load is an objective or subjective measure of how the external load affects the athlete.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
So a simple example is heart rate, right?
Yep.
So during that 5-mile run I did, if my heart rate were, say, at my lactate threshold heart rate, then you would say, oh, that's a hard run.
Sure.
If it was well below lactate threshold, then suddenly you're saying, oh, maybe not so hard.
And those are physiological or biological markers, so to speak.
Right. And a subjective measure of that might be the RPE, right?
Yeah.
So that, lactate threshold run, I'm probably rate something like 8 out of 10, right? That's pretty typical for that. And then, if it was submax, it'd be, somewhere lower than that. So that's an example of objective and subjective, acute, right? Yeah. Internal loads.
Yep.
We can also kind of like try to get an idea of the kind of maybe more chronic effect that these stressors have on athletes.
Right.
Or that one big stressor.
Over a period of time is what we're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So an example of that is like, say you follow up the next day, like you take morning readings of something.
Sure.
So now we're going to measure internal loads. So we're going to say, a heart rate variability, right?
Yep.
We're going to say grip strength. We're going to say vertical jump test. Yeah. And then
all classic measures.
Those are all classic measures that you're trying to get an idea of what state the athlete's in. And really what you're measuring, you're trying to understand the internal load they're under, right? How the body's responded. So the last one that, subjective way of doing that would be these surveys or questionnaires.
Absolutely.
And we know from research that those questionnaires can be really highly correlated to physiological changes in the athlete.
Yeah.
That's going to do it for us today. Be sure to go to trainheroic.com to start your 14-day free trial. And when you're talking to one of our representatives, be sure to tell them the Strength Coach Podcast sent you to get 10% off a year of the Pro or Elite Edition.
Hey everyone, it's Rachel Cosgrove with the Business of Fitness segment. And we have been talking about a few different ideas to add more revenue to your business and really looking for ways that we can start to earn more and worry less, sleep good at night, and enjoy our business. And so hopefully you got some ideas over those last 3 segments on number 1, how to add more clients. So really thinking about ideas to market and to get those clients coming in and then get them to commit to you for a longer period of time. And then number 2, getting those clients to spend more. So when they are in your gym, how can you offer them more value and give them more of what they need so that they will end up investing more in your business. And then the third way is to get them to spend more often. So getting them to come in more often and then offering them some different, goals, challenges, things that you could help train them for that are outside of what you already are offering them as part of their basic membership. And so as part of getting them to come in more often, I mentioned in the last segment about the 100 workout challenge. And this is something that we started 7 years ago, and it's become huge at Results Fitness. So I just wanted to share a little bit with you about how we run that, just to give you some ideas of how you might run one at your own gym. And what we did was we decided at the halfway point of the year, we wanted to challenge our members to get 100 workouts in the last half of the year. And this is really because everyone starts the year off strong. They all come in consistently. And of course, January, February, everyone's super pumped and excited. And, attendance isn't usually a problem. I think that's one of our favorite times of the year as coaches, because our job is super easy. But then as the year goes on, things can start to fizzle, and whatever, intentions they put into place at the beginning of the year, we can lose sight of. And so at the halfway point of the year, I send out a handwritten letter, which I just, write handwritten on a yellow legal pad, and then we photocopy that, and it looks like they're getting a handwritten letter from the owner of Results Fitness. And it's just kind of a marketing idea for you. That letter goes in the mail. All of our clients get that letter, and it's basically me saying, I'm calling you out. I want you to step it up this last half of the year and do 100 workouts before the end of the year. And we incentivize them, so if they get those 100 workouts in by the end of the year, they will get $100 added to their customer prepay. So we have like a client prepay for the gym, so they can spend that money in the gym on shakes, on supplements, on any of the stuff that we offer. And so it's pretty big incentive. Now it's a tough goal. So 100 workouts is 4 workouts a week. It works out to on average. And so they do have to get strategic about it. They do have to figure out, okay, if they are going to be gone for a week, then they're going to have to squeeze in 5 workouts, or so it's one of those things that what we found, definitely I think all of us struggle with is our clients being consistent, right? So the more consistent they are, the better results they get. And so a lot of our clients will come in and if maybe they don't want to work out 4 days a week, we still will let them come in and foam roll and stretch and do a recovery session and count that as one of their 100 workouts, but they still come into the gym. And so by getting them to come into the gym, they really start to, 1, get better results. So they're a walking, talking advertisement for you. 2, they're loyal to you. They are coming in regularly. They are, they're really taking advantage of everything you have to offer, whether it's supplements, shakes, everything else that you are offering of value in your gym. And then 3, at the end of the year, and we've also had a lot of our coaching members will give an exclusive T-shirt too. So, and people will do anything for a T-shirt. So if you're not up for the $100 club bucks, or if you don't have all of that in place yet, then you could just order some really cool T-shirts and challenge your members to this for that. The other piece of this is that we do require them to check in on Facebook. So they end up doing 100 check-ins on Facebook for the last half of the year. Now this definitely becomes a huge marketing thing, because obviously all of their friends and family are seeing them check in every single week for their workouts at Results Fitness. It also gets them on Facebook. And so, they start to share different pictures, different, their workouts, everything that they're doing with everyone that they know. And so regularly throughout this time of the year, if I'm at like a networking event or anything in the area, I'll have people say to me, oh my gosh, you're the gym who, so-and-so is doing that 100 workout challenge. And so you become kind of the talk of the town because everybody, all your clients are checking in regularly to get credit for their workouts. And so that's another piece of the 100 workout challenge. So it's something I definitely recommend. If you don't want to start with 100 workouts to start, you could actually do, like I was saying before, maybe it's even 8 workouts a month, right? Like maybe you break it down to something even smaller, so that you're just giving your clients that incentive to come in more often, be consistent, get great results. And, that's going to basically incentivize them to keep coming to your gym, but then it's also going to, be great advertisement for your gym as well. So it really builds that long term, and our clients love it. They all get super competitive, and they try to be the first one to finish. And so we have some of our clients that try to finish super early, get all their 100 workouts in early, and so we put their names all up on a board. It's a great way to give recognition too. So recognition is one of the things that people don't realize, that they want more of. Your clients want more recognition. And if you're not recognizing them, it'll be likely that they'll start to look elsewhere for another gym or another trainer. So this is a great way to give them that recognition. So hopefully that's an idea for you that you can take and run with, however you want to put that into play in your gym and your business to get your clients coming in more consistently, but also to help add revenue to your business. So hopefully you guys have got some great ideas over these last 4 segments of how to earn more revenue and, really take control, realizing that it is simple. There really are only 3 ways to make money in your business: by adding more clients, getting your clients to spend more, and then getting them to spend more often. That's all you got to do. So just think of those 3 things, start to dive into each of those, get some good ideas, and take action. So till next time, thanks everyone for tuning in. If you want any more information on us and when our next event is, check out resultsfitnessuniversity.com. Thanks, guys.
Hey guys, I want to welcome you to the Functional Movement Systems segments. My name is Lee Burton. This is going to be a 2-part series on research and data regarding functional movement systems. I know a lot of you guys know myself and my colleague Greg Cook from the FMS world, and I think too often people just look at FMS as being the screen. And hopefully what I can talk about in the next couple segments is more of a system. And that's the approach we've been taking really from day one, is trying to offer up a better system. And I know since we've been doing this for now, going on 20 years, Greg and I have been working together with the screening and trying to develop our system. There's a lot of research that's come out, and that's kind of what I want to focus on, is talking about the research that's out there, and as well as some of the data that we're starting to look at. And I'm going to focus more on the research in this segment, and then the data and kind of how we look at things here internally within FMS on our second segment, because they really do complement each other, but there's a different approach. And that's kind of what I want to get into. And I think, I want to kind of talk about research, because now that there's so much research being put out on the FMS, and really specifically the screen, I think it's good to kind of take a step back and start putting things in perspective. And hopefully I'm going to give you today a really honest look, or some feedback on what some of that research is really saying. Because I think too often people just read one study or look at one thing, whether it's through social media or just take a study and pull out bits and pieces and then make a broad statement about what that research is saying. And I think that's really been problematic, I think, for us and looking at it, because I really have been trying to be very objective and just saying, hey, here's what the research says, here's what it says, or it doesn't say, based off of the screen. And one thing that, really brought to my attention, I think it was probably a couple weeks ago, one thing that we're trying to do is I'm trying to work with a lot of universities and instructors and professors, and trying to get the movement screen, since it is being taught in a lot of places, trying to give them some resources they can use. And one professor basically said, why would I want to teach the FMS? Because it's not a valid or reliable test. And I understand that, but I think that's a very broad statement. When you say something is not valid, I think you first need to determine what's the purpose. What's the purpose of any test that you're going to try to utilize? And that goes for anything. Again, we're in the strength conditioning world. There's a lot of things we need to be looking at related to what we're trying to do, whether that's weight loss or whether that's trying to improve endurance or power or strength. There's definitely some baselines we need to measure. And obviously with us, with the movement screen, we're just trying to look at fundamental movement, and that's what it was designed to do. So the objective, I think, is something we need to first have a good understanding. And researchers, I think, too often don't appreciate the objective of what the movement screen was designed to do. And quite honestly, it was really designed to be able to pick up problems or significant issues with movement to help better prevent injuries. Now, when I say prevent injuries, that's where all the flags go up, and people in the research world and some people in the strength conditioning world, or people that we interact with, throw up the red flag and say, well, that doesn't do this, it doesn't do that. And my response to all these people are, well, then what are we doing in this profession? If you're in this profession and you're not trying to prevent injuries, then what are you really trying to do? Because all of us are really trying to prevent injuries. And I think where we were coming from the movement screen perspective is trying to do a better job in the weight room. Not put a high school age kid or even a 45-year-old into positions with load that they're not ready to do. And that's the purpose of the movement screen. Better select exercises, determine if you have pain, and help make better decisions as it relates to exercise selection. It's not determining who's at higher risk for injury. And I think that's where it gets into a little bit of confusion. It was not trying to determine who is going to get injured or who is at higher risk, where, again, we'll talk about some of that research. But again, we have to understand when you say, well, it's not a valid test, what are you trying to do with the movement screen? What are you trying to make it valid to do? Is it trying to predict injury? Well, if you're trying to predict injury, the movement screen, based off some research, in certain populations has shown to be higher risk in certain populations if you score lower in the movement screen. But as far as predicting injury, it doesn't really do that, and not many tests can do prediction as relates to injuries. But if we just talk about injuries, because I know that's what a lot of people like to refer to or discuss, and I think part of the issue was early on when we were putting out the movement screen, we were talking about injuries and preventing injuries and things like that. And I think that miscommunication is part of the reasons we have even now some miscommunication about what it's designed to do. But let's talk about injuries in the research. And a lot of times when injury research is done, we don't think about it being multifactorial. There's a lot of things that should go into what we're looking at with injuries. And the movement screen, specifically as it relates just the movement screen, some research says it does have a relationship to injury. Some research says it doesn't. So the takeaway from what the research is out there saying now is it's kind of up in the air. I think really it's dependent upon the population group you're looking at. But if you're really in the world and you're in the situation that you want to know who's at higher risk for injury, you need to add other tests. You need to think about other things. And the one thing that we try to do with the FMS is put you in a category, a higher risk, lower risk, moderate risk category, using other things, using your injury history as an example, using other tests like an ankle mobility test, like a Y balance test. Those are the things that when we try to determine who's at higher risk, if that's our goal, we need to think about other things. And I think that may be the takeaway, hopefully, looking at research and how it relates to the movement screen and injury risk. Really, if you're just using the movement screen, there's certain populations that may be beneficial, but other populations probably not. So I think that's what you have to ask yourself when you're using the movement screen. But remember, it wasn't really designed for that. It was designed to help better select exercise. So then we got to look at the big thing. And injuries is good to talk about. But the biggest thing I think gets overlooked way too often, and there was a research study just put out, I saw this past a couple of days ago, is the test reliable? Meaning, can I do the screen and you do the screen and get the same results? And we know, based off multiple studies at this point, 14, I'm probably approaching 20 studies that say that it is a reliable test, both inter-related reliability. So that's probably the more important piece for what we want the movement screen to really help us do, is it is reliable. We're going to get the same results based off who's doing it. Over time, we can get similar results. So that's a good thing. So when you're out there doing testing and you're trying to choose which test to do, make sure it's a reliable test. And the one thing that has allowed the FMS movement screen to be reliable is how we set the test up. And I think that's an important thing. A lot of people do an overhead deep squat, but if you don't have certain criteria in how you set each of your tests up, you can't be sure you're reliable. And that reliability is important because, one, we want to make sure you're getting results and it's pointing you in the right direction. Again, for exercise selection, making sure you're pointing, you're prescribing the right exercise or avoiding certain exercises. That's why the reliability is important. It's also important to make sure you set the right baseline. I want to make sure I set the right baseline so I can then determine if my correction or intervention, does it work? So if I don't set the right baseline, I can't be confident that I'm working on the right thing, prescribe the right exercise, and then make sure to see if what I did actually had the impact I want. So reliability is an important piece for anything that we're doing. So we know it's reliable. Injury research, kind of all over the place, to be quite honest. And if you really want to determine injury, if this person or group are at higher risk, you need to bring other things into it. And you're probably better off using categories, putting somebody in a different category and not just trying to label this person as, you got this much of a chance to get injured. Looking at different risk categories like high risk, low risk, moderate risk. And that's one thing that we can do. So the other thing that we want to look at, or other thing that the researchers do that is probably not the best way when you're looking at the movement screen, is looking at that total score. And that's one thing Gray and I have been talking about for years and years. The total score only matters if it's low. And I think that's one thing that people want to look at this total score. And it's kind of cool to talk about in general, but it really doesn't tell us a lot about the individual and how they're moving. We got to look at those individual scores. And I think that's also what's starting to be flushed out in the research as well. Looking at individual scores rather than the total or composite score. Actually, there's some research that says, if you score lower on this movement, well, your injury risk may be higher. If you score higher on this movement, it may tell us different things. So that's one thing that the research is starting, I believe, to start showing us a little bit more. Now, again, there's right now, there's probably close to 200 referee journal articles on research related to the movement screen. So there's a ton of information out there. It's going to be a lot more coming out. So we can also look at performance being another thing, is how does the FMS relate to performance? And I think that's another thing that's really up for debate, and really not a lot of research has been consistent in how the movement screen scores relate to performance. So we got our injuries. Research has done a lot. Reliability being the big thing that I think we can definitely say at this point, almost close the door on reliability. It is a reliable test. And then we look at performance. Those are the big things, the big rocks people want to look at when it's related to the movement screen. So injuries, we've kind of talked about that. We look at performance as kind of, inconsistent how it looks at performance. But when you're looking at research and you're looking at the movement screen, you're asking certain questions. Remember, is it a valid test? Meaning, what is the movement screen designed to do? Many years ago, Gray and I felt like we built a good test. It's like, hey, we built a solid car, but now if we want to put that car on the racetrack, you know what? It wasn't necessarily meant to be on the racetrack, but can we do it? Yes. Let's just see how far it can go. We want to see if we built this car, can we put this car off road, and let's see how far it can go. That's what research is designed to do. Let's take a good test and let's put it in certain situations to see if it can tell us certain things. That is great. I want researchers and people who are in this profession to continue to do that, continue to push and see what are some certain things that it does and doesn't do. But again, let's always go back to what the objective of looking at good movement should help us do. Whether that's using the movement screen that we have or other tests that I'm going to kind of get into on this part 2 segment. I'm talking about how the movement screen research is actually helping us do our next level. So I hope that kind of gives you a little bit of perspective. We've got a lot of information on functionalmovement.com related to research. We try to continue to update everything we put on there. So go under functionalmovement.com and check it out. Thank you so much. I'm going to be doing the second part coming up next week. So I hope you can check it out. And if you got any other information, again, my name's Lee Burton. Anything else you're concerned about or questions about, please go to our website, shoot us an email. Love to hear from you. Thank you so much.
All right, now it's time for the MariGold Bars Hit the Gym with the Strength Coach segment. Remember, MariGold Bars, my favorite bar. I have one every day. You can get $10 off your first order by going to MariGoldBars.com, putting in Strength Coach 10. You'll get $10 off your first order. I promise you, you will not regret this. Not only will you like them, you'll feel confident giving them to your athletes and your clients. All right, today I have on my buddy Jim Kielbaso. He's the head of the International Youth Conditioning Association. Jim, thanks for coming on.
I appreciate it, Anthony. I love that you asked me to come on and talk about this stuff. It's going to be cool.
All right. Well, I'll just set this up a little bit. Jim made a post yesterday on kind of a funny post, a video on Instagram where he had the guys, kind of goofing around and screaming and yelling and laughing, and then he kind of comes up and says, "Sorry, guys, I know this had nothing to do with what I want to talk about." A little bit of clickbait, just kind of kidding around because he wanted to make a point about long-term athletic development and basically feeling like, Jim, you said, we're missing the point about long-term athletic development, and that, it's not all fun and games. It is an art based on science. So I wanted to get you on to kind of just take a step back, and I want you to define long-term athletic development. Then we'll go into what you feel like what's happening with how people are interpreting this. But first, I do want to say, because I learned about this when I started with the Titleist Performance Institute and took their junior class. And so for me, long-term athletic development was basically this idea that there are these different windows of trainability, right? So I forget exactly what the ages were, and you can talk more about that in a little bit. But, so there was these different windows where in development that we could take advantage of certain things. So, for example, ages 5 to 7, there were certain things that we could do with kids to, help them with play to kind of boost certain things. There was things between, let's say, 8 and 10 or 11 that they could do, and then maybe 11 and 12, 13 and 14, and then we come on and we're kind of into regular training, I guess, or not really, but anyway. But the whole idea just that there was this kind of specific plan based on not only based on their development, and early on it was like I said so there are certain things that they started I think at 5 years old. They might even been earlier than that. But Jim, tell me about my definition of long. Do I kind of have that right?
Yeah, I think you do. I think what's so hard about long-term athlete development is that it kind of started out as just like a theoretical model and these graphs, and they would then they figured out that they'd put some titles to it. But a lot of people would see these graphs and models, and they didn't really know what went into them. So they just started talking about the names of them, and that's where I think a lot of people kind of got left off, and they rather than getting into the meat and potatoes of okay, you have this time where you're supposed to be working on fundamental motor development, so people would just start saying, oh well, you have to work on fundamental motor development, but no one talked about how to do that, or what else is going on, or how do you actually integrate sport training into all this stuff. Because really, if there's two kind of theories here. One is that this was called long-term athlete development to start, and then some people branched off and said, well, let's call it long-term athletic development because everybody's an athlete, and so we're developing athleticism. And that's kind of where people sometimes get confused, because there is a certain branch off period at a certain age. People either branch off into like the high performance model where they're going to be elite kind of level athletes, or they're going to, go the other direction and they're going to be lifelong, hopefully, movers and athletes and fitness participants. But it's like people didn't know when to split that off, and so there was a lot of misunderstanding, I think, because you had these people talking about windows of opportunity, like you mentioned, and then you had these age groups, and people took all this stuff as black and white. And it's not black and white. There's so much gray area. You can't just go based off of an age, because anybody with kids or who has trained a ton of kids knows that the differences in like a 10 or 11-year-old kid can be immense, and you're not going to train all of them the same way, and they're not all playing the same sport. They don't all have the same interests. They don't have the same family participation, the same opportunities. There's just so many different things. And then as people started diving into this a little bit more, even I think the founders and the people who originally started talking about LTAD, which is people like BoyleWe, back years ago when he was developing these models overseas, they've now realized that, hey, these windows of opportunity that we talked about, not really so much. Maybe there are windows where athletes are more susceptible to reaping the benefits of training, but really you can train all physical aspects all the time. So you can get stronger, you can get faster, you can get in better shape, at any time. The difference now is people starting to understand, well, how much do you emphasize and what do you emphasize? There's a lot more nuance and intricacy to it now that we understand more of it. But what I think the reason I came up with that post is that I think a lot of people took it as, well, LTAD is just playing games with kids. and it's just having fun and doing whatever we want with them. So a lot of times I'll see people throw up, a hashtag LTAD, and it's like, well, yeah, that's kind of what it is. And maybe I was part of it. Maybe I would throw stuff up on social media with that hashtag, and it was a game. And instead of explaining how this is part of a larger puzzle, that's just one piece, people started maybe thinking, well, this is all it is. And that's where I think that post came from. And that's kind of where we are.
Yeah, and it's funny because I remember, and I think Greg Rose and TPI did a great job with this in terms of they didn't have hard and fast ages, and that's why I was kind of like, oh, you could hear me saying, oh, I don't know what age this kind of was, because they did base it on. They even used the hat system, which is similar to the martial arts system, like of the belts. So it didn't really matter, this is where you probably should be, but like you said, there's so much difference between some kids at 11 or 12 or even 7 or 8, and certainly 13, 14, 15, whether kids have hit puberty. But I think what happened too is I always kind of felt like a lot of us wanted to adopt this based off of kids not going on the playground. When I say kids, I mean the real young kids, 5 to 10. Like people were using that almost as an excuse. Like, well, they aren't going in the playground. So some of the things that I learned through Titleist was it's almost like playground type activity, but with a purpose. Like the Titleist Cyclone was, hey, make sure they're doing a push, a pull, a jump, a skip, a hop, a crawl, a roll, striking on the ground like a hockey stick, striking in the air like a baseball tee, throwing like a football. So there was all these different things that they kind of wanted to get you to do that I felt like I got without going to a gym, that I got going outside. I'm obviously we're a little older, so when we were kids, that was happening. It doesn't happen as much, but I kind of felt like this was more a product of what was happening in society.
I totally agree with that. And I think that that's kind of what you see now is that exactly what you said. People realize that most kids are only getting about 50 minutes of phys ed a week, right? In a lot of places in America. And youth sports has kind of become the new PE. That's where kids are getting their activity, is by participating on a travel soccer team or a travel baseball team or whatever their team is, because that's where they're getting it. And what's happening in those places is you're signing up for soccer or baseball or volleyball. So you're getting sport training. You're not getting general PE. So kids started that's where the whole early sports specialization model kind of came in, is they thought, well, we're going to stick them in this sport and we're going to train them on how to do this sport. And once you get indoctrinated into a sport culture, that's where your friends are, and that's what you get used to doing. And now you're going to move up to the next level. And I don't really have time to do another sport because I want to continue with my friends and my coach and all this kind of stuff. And then you started seeing all these injuries. And even Dr. Andrews down in the Andrews Institute has written a book about all the injuries that occur because of early sports specialization. And the thing is, though, it's not just about encouraging kids to play another sport. It's about having this whole evolution of an athlete, so that you can play one sport, I guess. I'm not saying I recommend it, but those sport coaches need to know how to integrate some of these concepts, teach the kids fundamental movement, motor patterns, and have them do activities outside of exactly what that sport is. And it's not that hard to do. You can integrate some of these things into a 10 to 15 minute warm up a couple times a week, but sport coaches haven't really latched onto this yet. So far, it seems like most of the interest has come from either national governing organizations who understand that this is happening, or a huge push from the strength and conditioning profession. But those two organizations aren't really talking. So you've got all these sports performance professionals who think that they know what the kids need, but they don't have the kids. The kids are in the sports organization. So what I've been trying to do is kind of bridge that gap and teach the organizations how to integrate some of these things into their sport practices so that the kids are getting what they need where they already are. And that's sometimes difficult. And some of this comes back. Everybody always looks at the top, and they try to look at the top down. And when the top is not doing well, they start analyzing what happened early on. And some of this came from analyzing German soccer versus Brazilian soccer. And they would say, well, the Germans aren't doing so well anymore because they, all they do is specialize in soccer, and they're not developing the love of the sport and the and the art. But look at the Brazilians; they're out in the streets, playing in bare feet and in dirt, and they learn creativity and finesse and all these things, and that's why they're so good. But I don't think anybody in the world would say, well, the best model to develop a basketball player is to never bring them into a gym. It's just to go out on asphalt courts and let them get pummeled by bigger kids, because that's how most of the best athletes in the world have developed. But you don't really see people saying, well, that's a great model. We know that there's more to it. So instead of looking just at this top down and bottom up model, you kind of have to look at the whole, the whole development of a kid, because we may not be always developing elite athletes. They may be going in different directions. And that's what's so difficult, is there's just so many nuances involved here.
Yeah. Well, obviously I'm always going to go by my experience, but I really only played one organized sport growing up, and that was hockey. And although I did play a little soccer, a little bit of football here and there, like early on, like 9, 10, whatever, did a few of those things, but branched off. So I just loved hockey so much, but I couldn't play year round. I used to go to hockey camp for 2 weeks in the summer. But even with that being said, we played football, touch football, and kill the guy with the ball. Those two things. Or if it was football season, we played baseball with like a tennis ball on the street. And we played street hockey. I had a basketball net in the backyard that we didn't play 3-on-3 or 2-on-2 or anything like that. But we were always shooting around. We played hide and seek. We were always on our bikes. So those were the things. Like, even though specialization then is so different from specialization now. And I think what the missing piece too that people forget is there's a piece of development that's missing with organized sports, is the kids making their own rules on the playground. There's all these things that we used to come up with, these different rules, and no, you got to touch the telephone pole first before you go to first base or whatever it may be. By the way, the greatest rule ever that I ever saw. I wasn't playing. I saw these kids playing. We were like 18 or 19. We wish we thought of this. These kids were playing, and if you hit the ball. They were playing baseball. If you hit it and it got to somebody, before it got to somebody, if you called cheap, you got to do it over again. We love it. Me and my buddies still say it to this day. 30 years later, we always call cheap. So
that's an awesome idea. You brought up hockey, and I will say that back, I don't know, this is probably over 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago almost, Ken Martell was with USA. I think he's still with USA Hockey. He developed what they call the American development model. And it was more based on the stuff that Bally had done overseas and even in Canada. And he recognized that we have to do more different things and develop athletes from a younger age with more general physical literacy. And that has been a huge help to the long-term athlete development model in America, because other organizing bodies have kind of said, oh, well, let's jump on that. Now, kind of what I was alluding to in that social media post was that you've got these people who understand it and they're talking about it. The problem is with the implementation of it, and it's not getting down to the lower level. So do we know that they should be doing that? Yes. But is the youth hockey coach actually doing it? Or are they just getting on the ice because they have to, because there's so much pressure to win games? Because if they don't win the games, then kids start looking for other teams to go to. And then the organization doesn't have as much money and as much prestige, and they start to drop down to the lower levels. So there's a lot more to it than just the top telling everybody, hey, you should do all this stuff, because there's pressure. There's pressure from coaches. I've had soccer coaches tell me that exact same thing. Like, hey, we understand that this is important, but if we don't win these games, then we drop down a level. And if we drop down a level, kids are going to move to another club. So we really have to focus on soccer skills, because if their soccer skills aren't good, then we're going to lose the game. And so you got that mix of short-sightedness and specificity versus the long-term vision and the general training. And I think people, they struggle with having that balance between, can you actually get good at a sport versus just being general. And I think that's kind of where people have gotten away from learning that balance. And now they're just, we'll just do playground activities, and that's all the kids need. Well, they do, but they also need to practice their sports skills at the same time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. I mean, we haven't talked much about the parents, because we all know that obviously they're the ones too who are, they're going to say, well, my kid's got to do this because he's got to make this team. Because, not only like if the team's staying there, they want their kid to be on that team. They don't want to be on the lower league, because they're thinking, the kid, blah, 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 we want him to go to college or whatever, which is a huge part of it too. And they need to be. And I struggled with it with a friend of mine who I still train his kid, who's an amazing hockey player. And he always comes around eventually, like 2 years later. Oh, remember what you were telling me 2 years ago? Yeah, I just saw something on that. It's great. Thanks.
Well, it's funny that you said that, because one of these soccer coaches told me that he said, it's different if you come in and do some of these things and parents are watching because you're doing them for the right reasons. He said, if we do that, if the soccer coaches are doing the same things and kind of playing games, then the parents are looking at them like, what the heck are you doing? We're paying you we're paying you to teach them soccer. So a lot of it does come from that parent's perception of, what is valuable and what's in the best interest of the kids.
Absolutely. It's similar to training your spouse, by the way, because that's just one thing you don't want to do. My wife says I am the worst trainer in the world. She always tells me, I don't know how you got any clients. So, but then she'll do something like, oh, by the way, I push-ups. I'll say do push-ups. She's like, I hate push-ups. I'm not doing push-ups. They suck. And then, as she'll see something on like some magazine, oh, I'm going to start doing push-ups. Oh, okay, good. Yeah, good idea. Why didn't I think of that? Jim, is it, and we're going to get a little bit more deeper into long-term athletic development in a minute, or athlete development. Is it as easy as or is something as simple with some of the coaches is saying look, in your warm-ups, if you're a hockey team, get a soccer ball out, get a football out, get a baseball out, and do 5 minutes of each. I mean, is that something that is even worth doing, or in some of these practices, kind of introducing some sport into it?
That's a great question. So you said, is it worth it, or is that all it takes? No. And unfortunately, I think that's what some people think, well, just let them play baseball at the beginning. Well, it's a little more than that. Kids need to learn how to move in all different planes of movement, and they need to learn all the fundamental motor skills. They need to learn how to run and jump and twist and turn and shuffle and skip and tumble and have general hand-eye coordination, kinesthetic awareness. So they have to learn how to coordinate their bodies, and some of it comes from doing those things, and competitiveness also comes from doing some of those activities, and it does keep it fun. So there's a place for it, but I wouldn't recommend to sport coaches to, just if you're a soccer coach, don't just have them play ping pong for 5 minutes beforehand because it's hand-eye coordination. That's part of what it is, but you also have to balance, using their time wisely, and parents are paying for this, and your field time or your ice time matters. So you can't just do that. It would be a little bit better use of time to have the athletes, let's say you're a hockey coach. Maybe you spend, you have everybody get there 15 or 20 minutes early, and you do some dynamic warm up. Maybe you do a fun game, even if it's like knee tag or ninja or anything like that, so that it's fun. It involves watching somebody else do something. Then you could do a couple of more like strength exercises, plyometrics, along with your dynamic warm up and all that. And it's okay to get athletes stronger, even at a young age. I'm not talking about putting a barbell on their backs, but one of the biggest predictors for success in sports for young athletes is their strength and their size. So bigger athletes are going to be better at sports. Stronger athletes are going to be better at sports at a young age. What happens when you're good at a sport at a young age? You develop confidence. When you have more confidence, you play better. You get better faster. You enjoy it more. So if we know that those are the predictors, we can't really change size, but we can change strength because, man, I see a lot of young kids, and I'm talking about 8 to 11 years old, who, if you have them just do some like basic jumping, like a split squat jump, they do like 2 of them and their legs are dead, or you have them do a push up and they literally can't do a push up and they're whining about it. So a little bit of general strength development just from body weight exercises can go a long way. I don't know about you, but I used to jump rope for hours. Kids don't jump rope anymore. They don't have, they're not doing that kind of stuff. They're not putting the Nerf hoop up and trying to dunk on it 100 times in an hour. I used to do that all the time.
The Nerf hoop.
Yeah. So some of it can just be that kind of thing where they're just doing jumping and climbing type of activities. If you see something to do a pull up on, have kids hold on to it and hang, maybe do monkey bars and do a pull up, and develop that a little bit so that strength will translate to the field because they can accelerate and decelerate and balance better. It kind of helps everything.
Absolutely. Good stuff. Go a little bit more deeper into long-term athlete development in terms of what you would like to see, what you're trying to get people to think about with these different, I don't want to say windows of opportunity because we're finding out, obviously, like you said, they're not, they might be wrong, but like what should we be doing, or what is there like some sections of their ages that we should think about, or what would you like to see from that piece of like structure? Yeah.
So all right, let's think about it. We'll kind of make it in age groups because that's all that people kind of understand, and that makes sense too. I think below about 8 years old, somewhere in that 6 to 8 year old range is when kids get a little more interested in doing some things. But below that, that's not where kids are going to train. They're not going to come to a training center. That's up to the parents at that point. A lot of it is. And there are some great programs out there that are like there's a program called Little Kickers, and there's gymnastics programs that do some great motor development activities. And and if you can enroll your kids in something like that because you don't want to do it yourself, great. If you want to just do it yourself, play catch with kids. Get them on a trampoline. Get them shuffling around. Get them moving around. And you don't have to call it shuffling. You can just be in the bedroom and say, "Here, let's move back and forth. Do it like me," and throw, pass back and forth. Climbing and tumbling, and just get kids aware of their bodies. That's what's going to help kids develop at an early age so that they're more prepared for stuff that comes when they're ready to train a little bit more. And that little bit ready to train usually comes between 8, 9, 10 years old. And that's when they can expand their, we'll call it physical literacy. And physical literacy is like, we used to just call it athleticism, but whatever, terms change. And that's basically enhancing those fundamental motor skills. So now, instead of just running, now you can teach them some little tips, and you don't have to teach them, like this is exactly how to run. But if you see a kid running on his heels instead of sprinting on the balls of his feet, you can teach them, hey, let me teach you this secret of, how to run faster. And you can teach them to get their knees up or to swing their arms if they're doing things incorrectly. You can work on jumping and get them to use their arms, and you can make sure that they know how to skip, and they can maybe skip and catch at the same time. You can teach them the basics of catching. A lot of kids don't know how to catch or throw. If they missed out on that kind of thing when they were really little, you can catch up usually in that 8 to 11-year-old range. Later on, it's a lot more difficult to catch up. So that's kind of where you're going to catch up. The hard part about that 8 to 11-year-old range is some kids get into sports that basically require early specialization. So if a kid is into gymnastics or figure skating, they better be doing some stuff by that age. Hockey is another thing. If a kid's going to be a good hockey player, he or she better know how to skate by the time they're 8 years old, or it's a lot harder to catch up later on. But during that 8 to 11-year-old range, that's when, you're still slow cooking everything, but you can start to insert some strengthening exercises and some plyometrics, a little bit of speed work into sport practices. So, maybe during the warm up, you're doing jumping activities. You're jumping over balls and hurdles and shuffling around cones and doing agility work while they're maybe dribbling a ball or passing and catching and throwing, and they can drop down and get a couple push-ups or do some core strength and then get back up and do another drill. They can do some short sprints, but you're really working on their nervous system at that point, not their metabolic system. And I think people kind of misunderstand that too. You don't need to work on athletes' endurance and anaerobic endurance when they're 8, 9 years old. It's more about the motor learning process. So are you still with me? We're still in that kind of, we'll call it 8 to 11-year-old range. Yeah. Once they get past that, and 11 is when kids are generally in about 5th grade. That's when kids start to get interested in things, and they start to recognize that other kids are faster, other kids are better, or they start to have an interest, and that's when you can start to really train them. And I'm not saying you need to throw a barbell on every 11-year-old's back, but you can start doing some general strength training exercises and teach them how to do movements in a little more organized fashion. Now you can start getting away from just all the variety, and somewhere in that range, some repetition is good. Even for the 8 to 11-year-olds, there is nothing wrong with doing the same thing over and over again, because kids do need to value repetition. And when I say the same thing, maybe part of your warm up is we're going to do 100 reps of jump rope, and then you're going to get 10 push-ups. And now that you can do 10, now we're going to try to do 11, and then we're going to try to do 12. So there's a little bit of progression that's involved in that too. But once they hit about 11 to 14, now you can really start to kick that up a lot and start to teach them the value of overload and progression. And now things are a little more serious because their bodies are developing, but their minds are too, and they can concentrate better. They have better body control. They're about to hit a hormonal response. They're going through growth spurts a lot of times at that age. So maintaining that coordination as their femurs extend and they get all thrown off and turn into baby deer. Like mobility comes into play too. So a little bit of, some more structured stretching and mobility work helps a ton. And usually then somewhere, between, I know this is a huge range, but 12 and 15, kids are getting serious now at this point, and they want it. They want to get stronger, and there can be a huge difference. There's some 15-year-olds that look like they're 12, and there's other 15-year-olds that are shaving beards. So you still have to be a little bit aware of where they are in their developmental age. But the kids that are smaller, they can still get stronger because that's going to help them feel more confident. And the kids that are bigger, they might be big, but they might be gumpy and slow. And how many kids have you seen that they weren't amazing athletes, but all of a sudden they shot up at about 14 or 15 years old, and now they're 6'3", and they weren't awesome athletes, in the past, but all of a sudden they can rebound and nobody can get it from them, and they can do things. And so now you can take those kids and kind of catch them up on some of the motor development that they maybe lacked earlier on, and you can get a little more serious with it. And that's about that age is also where kids start to figure out, am I going into the high performance track, or am I going to be more of a lifelong type of athlete or mover? And you can start to push them in one way, in one direction or another. Man, I just talked a lot. Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. Do you feel like in that age too, are we still, like, I know for me with the kid that I was training, and I did it because I grew up with his dad, and he's a really, like, he's trying to, Division I is in his track. He's like, whatever. We talked about this in our Strength Coach TV youth training roundtable that we did. Is there really, like, what's elite mean? But he's playing in these quote unquote elite leagues, et cetera, all across the East Coast and in the country. And in the very beginning, when he was like 11 or 12, he's small, so I was just like trying to do, like you said, like body weight. I tried to really make it fun. We did a bunch of different things. And then when he was, 13, 14, then this year I started to do a little bit more, I started to pick up some weight. And he's really feeling, he actually texted me and he said, listen, this training, I could see the training paid off, because he's already played like 15 games in hockey. So I wasn't, though, this year, I didn't really have the bend on fun as much. I was like, look, we passed that page or that stage, and I feel like, okay, you want to be serious, we got to get serious now, because that's the direction he's going. Is the fun thing still in there for you? Do you feel like, guys, you still got to make it fun for some of these kids, obviously, but for the other kids, I feel like, look, you're here. We got a goal in mind. It's time to get serious.
Man, that is an awesome question, and I think of it as like turning the volume up or down on certain aspects. And when kids are younger, the fun volume needs to be up a lot higher, versus when they're older, you can turn it down and the seriousness volume gets turned up. But the fun volume can be in there just kind of inherently by kids understanding that fun when you're older is being good at something. So, basically, like, sports aren't fun if you suck at them. Yeah, no. Nobody likes going out there and just getting demolished. Like, that's not fun at all. So being good, is fun. And that kid is seeing that, hey, maybe I wasn't like, popping bubbles in the air when, with Anthony, but man, this is fun now. Like, I'm scoring goals, I'm doing things. So they start equating the training, or they see the relationship between the training and what they can do out on the field. But you can have fun in different ways. Like, maybe now you're having different conversations and you're joking around with him, or you're having a different relationship, or maybe the warm-up routine is slightly different each time, or maybe every once in a while you throw in a little bit of a training game, or you tweak something that is enjoyable. The fun can be very different, but it still needs to be enjoyable, because ultimately you want that kid to like what he's doing, so that he sees that he wants to continue doing it. And I videotape it sometimes. I still play games with NFL guys, and they, like, nobody loves a competitive game more than pro athletes. Yeah. They get into it, and they have fun with it, because the rest of the stuff that they're doing isn't always fun. It's a grind. So you have to mix it in, but definitely the volume gets turned down and the intensity gets turned up.
Yeah,
that's what I'm talking about with this long-term athlete development model. I think people, like, they either turn it on or off. Yeah. Instead of like, yeah, you can mix a little bit in, and you can mix some intensity in with 10-year-old kids. I coach my son's, he's 10. I coach his soccer team, and just last week I had to stop them and say, listen, you guys are too old to be constantly screwing around. You can talk to them and make it a little bit serious, because when they go out and win the next game, it's more fun, and then I'll turn around and we'll play a game with them. So it's not just about feathers and fluff when they're kids. You can talk to them like it's important sometimes too.
Yeah, absolutely. Good stuff. We kind of ended on that like 14 to 15 range. And for me, I guess I always felt like, all right, look, obviously not everybody went through puberty yet, even at 14, 15. Some people don't. But for me, I feel like, okay, once they get that development, once they get through puberty, it's almost like, all right, look, we're training you like normal training. Like there doesn't seem to be, and I know there's we were just talking about the high school the high school association, the high school strength and conditioning association, but it's almost like that seems to be a product of the stuff that we were doing wrong. Like you said, like a top-down approach. There's a reason we had to have that, because we were doing everything else wrong with the other stuff that we're getting these kids in high school that are underdeveloped or don't have that movement or that physical literacy.
Mm-hmm.
What do you feel about that?
That's absolutely true. In fact, I think a lot of pro coaches or college coaches look down to the younger age groups and say, like, you're sending them up to us and they're already a mess. Like, why can't you fix them earlier? And there's a huge difference between training a freshman in high school and training a senior, especially if that freshman has never done anything. And long-term athlete development is not just about how you train athletes in high school, though. That's a 4-year period where they're learning how to lift weights and they're learning how to do things with intensity, and they're seeing the results out on the field. But that's just part of the process there. But that's a huge growth area or growth time, because you got to teach athletes some basic fundamental movements and how to do them properly and how to progress properly and safety in the weight room and all these things. And I think that's also where you start going in that high performance track. And that high performance track is still part of long-term athlete development, because I think the ultimate goal originally was to create great athletes to compete at an international level. Mm-hmm. And when athletes are about freshmen in high school, like that's when recruiting starts. There's a lot of recruiting for all sports. Kids start getting selected to national teams and all this kind of stuff. So that training in that age is critical, because the athletes can basically open up opportunities for themselves to stay on that track, versus if they're slow and weak when they're 14, they're probably not going to look very good in showcases.
Yeah.
Does that make sense a little bit?
No, absolutely. Agreed. Very cool. Jim, let's just finish up with kind of maybe, some of the things that you'd like the direction, again, this all started from your Instagram post, like saying like, look, I think we've kind of, we're missing the point, and it isn't all fun and games. And we just talked about that. We talked about this idea between fun and purpose and variety and repetition. You did go over that. And we went over, kind of these different stages of long-term athletic development or athlete development. What would you feel like, kind of with your conclusion, just your big message, that something that you were trying to say, look, over the next few weeks, we're going to start to post some stuff to kind of get people back on track. What is that message that you really want to get out there?
What I really wanted, I wish I could reach the sport coaches and parents a lot more. And I really wish that we could help them understand, and I guess us as strength coaches, to understand that sports and training have to be integrated, and that the parents have to be educated and involved as well, so that everybody's on the same page. Everyone understands that we need to think a little bit more long term, not just we got to, let's skip everything except the sports skills this week because we got to win the game this weekend. Winning the game this weekend is not that important in the long, in the grand scheme of things. Very few, the statistics have shown that very few athletes who dominate at the junior type of level actually dominate at the international level when they're at the elite level. Mm-hmm. So let's have that longer term vision of, let's do well in our competitions, but let's train through them, and let's integrate training and physical literacy with sports skills and tactical awareness, and have kind of all the parties involved so that the kids get what they need, what they really deserve, which is a more global model of athlete development.
Yeah, that's so great. And as strength coaches, we need to just keep pushing to educate. We need to do a better job of educating those parents and coaches.
100%. I think it's really going to be up to us a lot of times to go out and educate the parents and coaches, and not just sit back in our holes and say, well, we'll wait for them to come to us and then we'll give them what they're missing, because we're not going to get all of those kids. And, I think that we also have to value what those coaches are doing, teaching them the skills, because, man, if a kid can't hit the jump shot or dribble very well, they're not going to enjoy sports. So there has to be that balance. And, something else that's really, kind of coming into my vision is that once you get to that elite level, I'm sorry, I'm going to keep going here for just a second.
No, keep going.
You either split off into that elite level, or you split off into the lifelong type of athlete, and mover, that's kind of like what we are. We're not, we're not high performance athletes, but we're down that path of elite or of long-term movers. Well, eventually those long-term movers and elite athletes are parents. And now those people can start training their kids at the early age because they know the process and they know what they need, and then get them into the system. So it should be kind of like a whole circular path. And that's why it's so important to educate people about how it works, because eventually, it's going to come full circle.
Absolutely. Great point. Great point about, becoming a parent as, this elite long-term mover. Yeah. And setting that example for those kids.
Or a coach. Maybe you're not a parent. Maybe you're a coach and you're working with kids, but you understand the process.
Good stuff. And speaking of education, I will have links. You can go to International Youth Conditioning Association and JimKielbaso.com for all Jim's stuff. So, Jim, thanks for coming on. Thanks for doing this last minute. You posted it yesterday. I texted you. I was like, I got to get him on to talk about this stuff and expand on it. So I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, man, that was awesome. When you hit me up, I didn't even know you had seen the post. So I thought, like, is this coming out of nowhere? But it all came together. And anytime, I'll do anything for you, man. What you're doing is awesome for the profession, and it's an honor just to be part of it like this.
All right, that's going to do it for episode 239 of the Strength Coach Podcast. Remember, you can try strengthcoach.com out for 3 days. Just $1, you'll have access to all the articles, videos, and programs, as well as the best forum on the net. It's the only place to have full access to Coach Boyle. He's on every day. Access that offer. Go to strengthcoach.com. Click the Join Now button to get started on your trial. Special thanks to Chris Party and the folks over at Perform Better. Right now, Perform Better's huge summer sale. Guys, 40% off everything. Ends September 30th. Remember, the Perform Better Functional Training Institute kicks in the fall. So check everything out at performbetter.com. Thanks to Coach Boyle and Jim Kielbaso for sharing their insights and philosophies into the world of strength and conditioning and performance enhancement and youth training. Thanks to Adam Doughty, Tim Robinson, and Train Heroic. Head over to trainheroic.com to start your free 14-day trial. Guys, you got to get in on this online training. Let them know I sent you. You'll save 10% off your first year of the Train Heroic Pro or Elite Edition. Rachel Cosgrove for the Results Fitness University Business of Fitness segment. Check them out at resultsfitnessuniversity.com. Lee Burton and Functional Movement Systems. Check them out at functionalmovement.com. Thanks to MariGold Bars, high-quality protein with all the premium ingredients, grass-fed protein, gluten-free, organic ingredients, non-GMO, no preservatives, low sugar, and they taste amazing. Check them out at MariGoldBars.com. Remember, you can get $10 off your first order. Put in the code StrengthCoach10. My name is Anthony Reddick. Go to ContinueFit.com for all of my stuff, all my podcasts, my Strength Coach TV. It's all there. Some other resources. Thanks again, and I'll speak to you next time.